Sex and sexuality is the cornerstone of spiritual awakening and enlightenment. Why it's so? In true spirituality, we are not trying to reach somewhere. We are not trying to be something else. But we are trying to rediscover ourselves as we are originally, as we are by default. So, in the context of knowing our real and permanent identity, that sex and sexuality play a very important role. We cannot forget the fact that the one who is trying, that the seeker who is trying to solve the mystery of life has originated in the womb of a mother through the process of sex. So this point is very central. Our identity as we know ourselves as today, as human beings, as a man or a woman, has a lot to do with our origins through the act of sex. We cannot become aware of a natural state until and unless the power of sex and sexuality channelized in the appropriate direction. Channelized in the direction of self-knowledge. Channelized in the direction of self-awareness. When this great creative force which is in each one of us is channelized in the appropriate direction, then awakening in the ultimate states becomes easier, becomes possible. The issue of self-identity or the permanent identity and sexual energy go hand in hand until the final stride is made by the seeker. There has never been a realized master or a Buddha who hasn't channelized or made use of this great energy within themselves. All the realized masters of the past and present have acknowledged the potency of sexual energy in the spiritual process, in the final process of enlightenment, but their approach and treatment had been and has been different. If someone wants to transcend into the eternal state, beyond wanting and not wanting, so sexual energy, its awakening is very, very important in the spiritual process, because it is this energy which propels, which gives the seeker the ability to make that final quantum jump, so that he or she can transcend from the conditioning and the programming and the compulsions of sensory objects, the conditioning and the programming of the mind objects, the conditioning and the programming of the ego itself. But sex and sexuality has always been a neglected topic. Either it has been seen down upon, or has been neglected, or called a sin. But this has been because of the fact that long back ago the spiritual leaders and the religious leaders could not handle the power of sex and sexuality within themselves, and because they were uncomfortable with handling this great power of sex within themselves and and other human beings, that they found it practical, they found it easier to negate the sexual energy, the sexual process, the sexual act. By negating it, they thought the topic of enlightenment, God, and awakening could be easily handled by them. Also, the forefathers of religion and spirituality were more concerned about creating an outward order in the society rather than the question of human internal human conflict or internal human order. And because of the need to create a social order, they were more concerned about structures of hierarchy, power, authority, and control. They found it very convenient and practical to negate, to degrade the sexual energy into something of a sin, something of a wrong deed, or something which needs to be not discussed or shared in the spiritual and religious narratives or discourses. Many of the traditions globally negate sexual behavior, see it very lowly, see it in a very bad light, and in societies and spiritual discourses where sex is discussed, it is done in a very crude and improper manner. And the general trend is that let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about sex and spirituality, because that is something else which has nothing to do or very little to do with spirituality or spiritual awakening. That's the general line taken by the majority in the spiritual and religious circles. And this line is not because of the fact that sexual power has got nothing to do or very little to do with the spiritual awakening of us, of human beings, but because of the fact that the spiritual leaders found it's very difficult to handle the topic of sexuality and sexual power in themselves, and therefore they could not give sermons, they could not give teachings based on anything to do with sex. They found they were not at ease with their own sexual energy and sexuality. And because of this attitude, this bias, this thousands of years old bias has continued in the human psyche, in the human culture, where the most important issues for a person's existence and his own well-being, the final ultimate spiritual well-being, are neglected, are looked down upon, and are brushed under the carpet.